Hey nerds, talk about Alex O'Connor again, British philosophy YouTuber who had a beard at this point, didn't have his awesome mustache, but and he's talking about consciousness. I talked about consciousness the other day in my Marx video. This just for context for this, he's talking about materialism, which is an option of consciousness, meaning that consciousness is just material, it just takes place in your brain, and then there's dualism, the idea that the brain and the body are separate and that consciousness is separate from the body, and then there's basically idealism, meaning that nothing is physical, everything is non-physical. And I also disagree with, well, wait, actually I was going to say compatibilism, but that's free will, not consciousness specifically. Anyway, he gets into what I think is, it's a very common but still pretty decent criticism of the idea of consciousness being purely material.
Consciousness is the big objection to materialism. It's the thing that screams out that there's something more than the mere material. Even just when you have an average dream, it's fascinating to think what's going on there. You've got images in your head. You can close your eyes and you can picture things. You can see colors. You can see shapes in your head. Like, where are those shapes? I spoke about this recently on YouTube, and people kind of, in my comment section, they really didn't like this idea. And maybe I'm just getting something wrong here, but I was talking about how if everything you experience, if everything in the brain is reducible to the material, when I close my eyes and see a triangle, there really is a triangle there. I can see it. It's there. And I think, well, where is that triangle? The materialist has to say it's reducible to just somewhere in your brain. But if I cut open your brain, I'm not going to find a triangle inside of it, right? And people thought that this was a bit silly because it's kind of like if you cut open a computer, you're not going to find the thing that it's displaying on the screen. But you still have the screen displaying the triangle. In your mind, you just have the mind. There is no interface. It's just the computer. It's as if the computer itself, somehow there was a triangle in the computer's own first-person subjective experience. Like, where is that triangle that you can picture in your head? Where the hell is it? Consciousness is the...
Yeah, where the hell is the triangle, bro? Still, yeah, I think that's a good criticism of consciousness as being purely material, because I've talked before about like my opinion that consciousness is not purely material, and I think that makes a lot of sense because, like, we don't, for one thing, we don't even know what consciousness is. So that's why I ultimately think that there's no good answer, there's no good option for this. We can't, like, I don't think we can really definitively know whether conscious is material or not material, because no one can ever agree on what consciousness means. Philosophers, they don't all, but they often define it in innumerable different ways depending on the philosopher you're talking about. And you can say that it's purely material, like Sam Harris, but then he's basically defining consciousness as, like, just basically, he's basically defining it as taking place in the brain. And then if you're saying that consciousness is non-material, then you don't really need to prove it because it's out, it's just out there somewhere. It's non-physical, not necessarily metaphysical, but non-physical in some way. So how can you identify consciousness if it's, if it's non-material, in order to prove that it's non-material? Because you need to use material means in order to prove that it's non-material, which is impossible. But this is why I think it's, like, whether a consciousness is material or non-material, I think, like I said, it's very difficult to define and figure out. And like he was saying, if you're thinking about a triangle, is the is the physical triangle actually in your brain, or is the brain generating those images? And, like, basically a materialist would say we can boil these down to brain states and brain processes, but that doesn't, like, does that mean that there's this idea of a triangle? Like he said, if you open up, if you dissect someone's brain, is there actually a physical triangle in there? No. But like he's saying, there's just directly the, like, it's basically like he was saying in terms of the analogy, it's like the computer actually having a triangle in it that you can find somewhere. It's not just software that's creating a triangle that you view, because you're viewing the computer through that interface of the screen. You're not actually the computer. So it's not the same as you viewing a triangle on the computer. It's it's as if you are the computer and you are viewing the triangle, but how can the computer know how it's creating a triangle unless it's actually conscious, but it's not a conscious thing. That's that's why, I mean, ultimately it proves his point, but it's still a bad comparison too, because a computer is not conscious and a human brain presumably is conscious. But then you have to explain the difference between consciousness and non-consciousness and have a strict definition of consciousness in order to distinguish between the conscious human mind, and a non-physical object such as a computer. So this is all why consciousness is such a conundrum, and I think it's borderline impossible to uh, to feel out to figure out, rather, objectively how consciousness works. But I would say that consciousness is not non-material, but it's also not material, and we just have no fucking idea how consciousness works. I'm not sure that we'll ever figure it out.